Let's go. He's nice.
Now that's a giant. Finally happened.
Oh man. Wow. Look at the payoff.
Yeah, buddy. We did it.
So the story with this buck is pretty interesting. We started getting pictures of him at the Next Level Deer Supplements mineral site down on the southwest pond bottom with several other bucks that we knew of. And at the time I couldn't match this buck up to any others that I had known previously, but with the frame he had started, I was excited to watch him grow throughout the rest of the summer. Once he finished his frame in the end of summer, the only deer that I could think of from previous years that it could possibly be was a buck that I had known for several years down on the creek bottom on the little alfalfa field. And I hadn't gotten any pictures of that deer down there, so it made sense to me, and it was a unique buck that I actually named Alfalfa. It's 3 miles as the crow flies from the little alfalfa field to the southwest pasture, and our deer do that pretty regularly. Usually we'll get pictures of most of the same deer, especially during the rut, back and forth between all of our separate properties on the creek bottom, the Green Pond Valley, and the southwest pasture. So I knew it wasn't out of the possibility for it to be the same deer, and again, it was the only one that looked like it could be the same. And not to mention that previous spring, 2021, while we were turkey hunting with Pat and David, I actually found Alfalfa's shed from that year in the creek down in the Green Pond Valley. So again, it made sense to be possible. Saw an antler in the creek coming down that trail. Oh yeah, I know what buck that is. That's a buck we call Alfalfa. This was his 4-year-old side. And he'll be 6 this year, so.
Is he bigger?
Not really. He kind of looks the same, looked the same last year. 5-year-old, he's just not a good deer.
We need to shoot him, get him out of the gene pool.
That's freaking awesome.
He'll be tasty.
Topping off the morning.
Absolutely.
Throughout the spring and summer of 2021, we created a new plot up on top of the hill where the previous plot in the southwest pasture had been, and we called it the Arrowhead plot. The main short-term goal of this 1.5 acre plot versus the half-acre plot we replaced it with was to draw more deer and mainly get a shot at prospect from the new 360 blind, since the hunting opportunity from a tree or trail is very limited out there due to the terrain and the lack of cover. So throughout September and October, I was mainly hunting the plot from a bail blind, since the drought really knocked back our plot screen and made hunting out of the 360 blind inaccessible without spooking all the deer off the plot. And many of the deer were hitting the plot every night, but usually after dark. They were also usually out of range from the bail blind, but in perfect range of the 360 the nights that they did show before dark. So that was pretty inconvenient. Throughout hunting it in September and early October, I'd only seen prospect from the blind twice, and both times well out of range at last light. In mid-October, I finally had my first encounter on the plot with Alfalfa, and if he came into range and gave me an opportunity, I was definitely going to take the shot. Well, like all my other encounters from the bail blind up to that point, he never made it into range before the end of legal shooting light. But after dark, he came inside of 30 yards. So that was pretty frustrating, but also cool to watch him through the binos in the dark and see how impressive his frame really was. Obviously, this was a deer that we would take if we got the opportunity, but seeing him in person just gives you a whole new perspective on how big they are. And in late October, I actually ended up getting a picture of this deer in the Green Pond Valley a mile away with Andy's buck from the previous video, the Perfect 10. I started getting frequent pictures of him back and forth between the two pastures, covering over 2 miles, and many times in the same day, and was surprised he was traveling that much and that often, but unfortunately he had broken off a brow tine. Once I saw the broken brow tine, a light bulb finally went off in my head, because I knew the day after that in the southwest pasture, I had a picture of Alfalfa and he still had both brow tines. So it actually ended up being 2 separate, eerily similar bucks on 2 properties relatively close, and they were actually both back and forth on both properties. And the one that I was getting pictures of mostly in the Green Pond Valley was the buck that I had called Alfalfa for several years before that. So that earned this buck the name the Imposter. After realizing that they were 2 separate deer and looking closer at the trail camera pictures, I could definitely tell that they were separate, but still pretty crazy how unique they each were, but how similar they were to each other. So I started digging back in trail camera pictures again, trying to find anything I had of the Imposter from previous years, and I ended up finding a card from late winter, the previous year, down in the southwest bottom that I hadn't checked before. And sure enough, late winter 2020, the Imposter showed up from out of nowhere with no previous pictures the rest of the season, and spent a few weeks hitting the feeder with Prospect and the Perfect 10 and several other bucks. So with no opportunities with the bow before rifle season, opening weekend was here, and Andy and I went out to the Green Pond to sit for the Perfect 10, who was still at the top of our list, knowing that the real Alfalfa would be out there in that area too and was a possibility to hunt. Well, on the first morning, we were able to take the Perfect 10 on an exciting spot and stalk, and you can watch the hunt for that in our previous video. So that afternoon, after we took care of the Perfect 10 and got him loaded in Andy's truck, him and his family hit the road and headed home, and I went out to the southwest pasture for a solo hunt. It's getting dark and I'm by myself, so I'll come out here and do a little better explanation tomorrow, but I got a buck down out in the southwest pasture. Anything can happen during the rut. Yeah, I came out here to the southwest pasture last night. I got a cell cam picture of Shorty on the north end at noon, so I was kind of hoping he'd still be out here. And we got to drive down in here and across all these saddles on top of the ridge to get over to where we park and walk into the arrowhead. And I got right where I'm parked right now. I looked over onto the hillside probably about 600 yards away, and I saw a big bodied buck standing there, so I threw the binos up, and it ended up being the big wide 8-pointer that I'd been thinking was Alfalfa all season until a couple weeks ago when I found out it was actually 2 separate, almost identical bucks, and the other one that I was getting pictures of just east of here was actually the one that I called Alfalfa from 2018 until this year. So I backed the truck up and kind of got it broadside to the deer, and he was looking at me the whole time. I was able to get out, grab my gun, sticks, tripod, camera, get everything ready, and I slipped back over the ridge straight away from him and started sprinting around these little ridges. I probably got up, I don't know, maybe 200, 250 yards and crept up to a ridge where I thought I could get a shot at him from, and finally found him bedded there just on the side of this little ridge. And I jacked the tripod up, got the camera just high enough above the ridge to where I could see him and not have him see the camera or see much movement above the skyline. And I ended up not being able to get a shot at him with the gun from there, so I hit record on the camera and just let it roll. And I crept down, I probably made it 100 yards down northeast of where the camera was, a little bit closer to the deer, and peeked up, and there was a bunch of dead cedar tops in the way, so I couldn't get a shot from there either. Made it back to the camera. He was still bedded took it off record and kind of readjusted the camera, hit record again, and then I needed to get back up to the west on some saddles above. And I finally made it up there and found a spot that I could shoot at him from. And I was gonna try to wait for him to stand, and then I decided I better try to get around him, probably another 300 or 400 yards onto the other side of him. And I backed up like 5 yards and grabbed my sticks and decided I better look and make sure he was still there, and when I looked, he was standing. So I grabbed my sticks and got ready. I got a buck down out in the southwest pasture. Anything can happen during the rut. I tried and load him up by myself. I've got to get him out of a canyon. He's down there on the other side, and there's a creek right here in front of my pickup, so it's gonna be fun. Let's go get him. Here he is, the super wide 8-point. Oh, sliding down the hill. Shot him right over there. He slid to a stop right here. Huge frame. That's freaking awesome. Pretty wild and cool story with the imposter and the real alfalfa, and even cooler that we were able to take 2 of our target deer on the same day during the first weekend. And the real alfalfa also ended up getting killed that weekend by our neighbor's daughter. So that was pretty exciting. It's always cool to see the shared success over there. But the 21 season wasn't over yet. The last weekend of season, it ended up getting a whole lot crazier with a once-in-a-lifetime experience for Carson. So check out Andy's hunt for the perfect 10. I'll link that video below, and stay tuned for the next episode because it gets pretty crazy. Thanks for watching, and catch you on the next one.